Remember that super exciting Rivera lore that left players begging for more? No? Well, here's her brother. Olivera's Trustmaster reward is a materia that boosts magic by 30%, limit burst damage by 50%, and increases the chain damage limit boost for both normal and elemental chains. And as fancy as that last effect sounds, it's the same thing you can find from Avalanche's Tifa. Of course, though the effect is nice, you're more likely to favor this materia due to the limit burst damage boost instead. His Super Trustmaster reward is a two-handed instrument. It boasts the most magic, the most MP, and believe it or not, the most spirit. Yeah, trust me on this! It also comes with 3 strong magic killers against demons, stones, and reapers, which is just the added bonus for anyone who wants to equip an instrument. But speaking of that, onto his active abilities. Inspiring Finale boosts Olivera's magic by 300%, inflicts a 135% Dark Imperil, a 30% Instrument Imperil, and boosts your team's Dark damage by 30%. Perfect Melody deals magic Dark damage that scales with morale, blows your team's morale gauge, blows his limit burst gauge by 1/3, and chains of Bolting Strike. Passives. With his Trustmaster reward or Super Trustmaster reward equipped, Olivera gets a Guts buff, resistance to Stop and Charm, and his normal attack changes into an attack that breaks break gauges of an instrument. He doesn't have any innate killers, but has a large amount of limit burst damage, a small limit burst regen, and 50% magic evasion. He meets half the chain limit cap, and has a hefty camouflage boost as well. He prefers to carry a single weapon, and in Clash of Wills he has access to a powerful Grandis ability, Musical Magic. It boosts his magic by a whopping 400%, throws on 3 tremendous magic killers against demons, stones, and reapers, raises his dark damage by 50%, and boosts his limit burst damage by 200%. That's not the only ability he gets in Clash of Wills. Depending on the level of your morale gauge, he either gets access to Building Crescendo or Gifted of Talent. Building Crescendo fills the morale gauge, and boosts your team's dark resistance by a whopping 120%. Gifted with Talent boosts the damage modifier of Perfect Melody, and gives your team an HP barrier. At EX plus 2, he gets an instant limit burst. At EX plus 3, he gets 500 magic. Let's look at his limit burst. It deals dark magic damage that scales with morale, and every 8 hits it gets stronger. If you were wondering, this basically chains of a quadruple casted Chaos Wave Awaken, which is a bit odd considering his abilities mainly chain with Bolting Strike. It's not just damage though, like down here. It copies certain effects from Olivera, and then puts them on Olivera. Now this sounds dumb, but it actually is, in a completely different way. You see, once he copies and pastes his buffs, he also extends their duration for an additional 5 turns. Now, what could be copied and pasted? Well, the game doesn't help you with that, but apparently the wiki thinks it's all relevant buffs. Buffs to magic, spirit, elemental resistance, limit burst damage, magic killers, elemental amplification, mitigation, and HP and MP regens. This can be absolutely ridiculous, but I'll explain more later. Time to change forms. Olivera has a true Brave Shift, which has no limitations whatsoever, and brings in the 7-star unit Rivera. Onto their active abilities. Symphonic Harmony is a self-chaining dark attack that scales off their MP stat and chains of Bolting Strike. That's right, it's a self-chaining Bolting Strike ability, meaning it does not chain with the tag family, but rather Bolting Strike. All things considered, this isn't really a big deal. You can pair this ability with another attack from the Bolting Strike family just fine. Rehearsal Session removes any breaks, stop, and charm from your team, then grants them resistance to said ailments, tacks on a 50% general mitigation buff, and gives them a 30% physical and magical mitigation buff against demons, stones, or Reaper-type enemies. Concerto Grosso can be used once per battle. It lets one ally use Remarkable Composition for 5 turns. The aforementioned ability deals dark magic damage that scales with morale, and chains with Bolting Strike. Not only that, but they can also quadruple cast it, which is just an added bonus. Passives. With their Trustmaster reward or Super Trustmaster reward equipped, the duo gets a Guts buff, resistance to the below status ailments. The normal attack is changed to restore a percentage of your team's MP, and at the start of the battle they automatically buff their limit burst damage by 150% and fill the morale gauge. Several of their passives are the same, but the one new one, Guest Appearance, changes things up significantly. It puts more focus on their MP stat. In fact, when holding a single weapon they get a 400% boost to their equipment MP. Their passive limit burst damage also doubles, reaching the cap without any issues. Their EX plus 3 ability also changes, shifting from magic to additional MP. Let's look at their Limit Burst. It's a self-chaining Limit Burst that deals dark magic damage which scales off their MP stat. It still chains of a quadruple casted Chaos Wave Awakened though, in case you were wondering. Let's rank Brave abilities. I'd prioritize Inspiring Finale to raise the level of its effects, Perfect Melody to deal more damage and fill his Limit Burst gauge, and lastly Symphonic Harmony to raise its damage. Time to make a damage rotation. Olivera's damage fluctuates greatly depending on whether or not he's in Clash of Wills. But first, let's pretend he's not. On turn 1, activate his Brave Shift, and cast Inspiring Finale and triple cast Symphonic Harmony. And then from turns 2 to 5, just quadruple cast Symphonic Harmony. If their Limit Burst is ready, then that takes priority. Repeat this thrilling rotation from there. Nothing says thrilling like music of no variation, huh? Still, rest assured that once he's thrown in Clash of Wills, that's where things get interesting. After all, there he'll have access to musical magic, gifted with talent, and you'll actually have more reason to use his base form's Limit Burst, with its ability to loop buffs. But before we talk about that, EX2? At EX plus 2, Olivera gets an instant Limit Burst. Now, Olivera's Perfect Melody will easily fill his Limit Burst once it's fully upgraded, and there's not too many reasons to fly in looping external buffs. Of course, if, on turn 1, the enemy does something stupid and you have to counter with strong resistances that only last for a single turn, then yes, it would be a shame to let those buffs go so soon, which is why turn 1 Limit Bursts can be useful. But what about EX plus 3? There, he gets 500 magic, or 500 MP, depending on which form. Nevertheless, they fulfill the same duties. More damage! More! And that's pretty much it. So how good is Olivera? Though at first glance he seems rather ordinary, his youthful demeanor belies an intense passion. His base form's Limit Burst has incredible potential for some absurd use. I've already talked about how it could extend the duration of certain buffs on Olivera, but I haven't mentioned just how much this effect could be abused. You see, by reusing his Limit Burst periodically, you can retain any buffs on Olivera for as long as you please. Olivera already has some great buffs on his own, especially in Clash of Wills, with its Grandest ability offering 400% stat buffs and 200% killer buffs, but you can also use other units to buff him, and then use Olivera's Limit Burst to potentially loop those buffs. For instance, perhaps you give him a 300% Limit Burst damage buff and let him keep that. Or maybe you like Lucas's 120% all elemental resistance buff, and want to stretch that out. Or maybe you'll take Shadow Lord's ridiculous 95% physical and magical mitigation buffs, and keep those as well. The fact that this ability is on his Limit Burst, which is also easy to fill and easy to use, thanks to Perfect Melody and his True Brave Shift, lets you continuously retain any buffs you throw on Olivera, and potentially make this the buffest boy you've ever seen. It helps that Olivera himself is a very strong damage dealer, and that's not even taking stat buffs, killers, or any other buffs you decide to loop into account. But even so, though I gush about the mechanic, I do have to be honest. There are several things to keep in mind. For instance, though Olivera can loop buffs, he has no way to get them back, meaning if he's dispelled or dies, then he becomes just another unit. A strong unit, sure, but not the buff boy he could be. Furthermore, despite having an awesome mechanic, Olivera is unfortunately stuck in the one row that's consistently overshadowed: damage dealing. To mitigate this, he does have some support, though it doesn't quite match the level of other, more dedicated support units. For instance, there's a strong Dark Imperil and a 30% amplification buff, but he doesn't have a team-wide Dark Imbuel. There's break removal and resistance buffs, general mitigation, and species mitigation, yet you can clearly tell there are a few things missing. And even though he can loop his own buffs, that doesn't really help the rest of your team. Interestingly, it can let you use Mastermind Zon's Projected Mirror more often, as you then have one unit with all the buffs that Zon here can then spread. But you generally don't use Mastermind Zon in lengthy fights, and as fun as it is to fill your team with gimmicks, you also have to worry about making a working team. Still, even with that in mind, you have to remember that Olivera is primarily a damage dealer. Thus, he becomes a unit that not only dishes out high levels of damage, but has the potential to grow stronger with accessible buffs. Furthermore, he has some support that raises his level of utility, thereby stretching out his viability. In the end, Olivera is a very well-made unit. His limitations are clear, but fair. He has additional room for growth, and though he's not a must-get unit, he's distinctive enough that skipping him means missing out on a lot of potential for fun. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, leave a like and subscribe. Comment below if you got Olivera. Honestly, now I really want him. I've never been one to stay on top of the meta, only getting units with cool designs or CG limit bursts, or units with intriguing and useful mechanics. Olivera is a small boy in a conductor costume, which is definitely quirky, but not really Sephiroth or Riser. But that limit burst style.